Until the reality of equality between man and woman is fully established and attained, the highest social development of mankind is not possible. Even granted that woman is inferior to man in some degree of capacity or accomplishment, this or any other distinction would continue to be productive of discord and trouble. The only remedy is education, opportunity, for equality means equal qualification. Abdul Baha. His Holiness Baha'u'llah has greatly strengthened the cause of women, and the rights and privileges of women is one of the greatest principles of Abdul Baha. Rest ye assured, ere long the days shall come when the man addressing the woman shall say, Blessed are ye, blessed are ye. Verily ye are worthy of every gift. Verily ye deserve to adorn your heads with the crown of everlasting glory, because in sciences and arts, in virtues and perfections, ye shall become equal to man. And as regards tenderness of heart and the abundance of mercy and sympathy, ye are superior. Abdul Baha.
So this week, we're really happy to have Mr. Charles Howard, and his topic is bringing spirituality and feminine leadership qualities into the workplace. Mr. Howard works as an organizational development consultant for Interlock Consulting in Brazil, helping clients build organizational cultures that are inclusive and sustainable. The essence of his work is bringing spirituality, feminine leadership qualities, and balance to the workplace. He's a mechanical engineering graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison and holds a master's degree in education from the University of Alabama. He has over 30 years of experience working on diversity and inclusion, social justice, and sustainable development issues in communities and organizations throughout the US and various parts of the world. His talk will spearhead a spiritually based discussion afterwards. So with that, I'll hand it off to Mr. Howard.
Hey, my name. Thank you very much for the warm introduction. Welcome to everybody who's here. Some of you may be here for the first time. So Armin asked me to give a brief introduction on the Baha'i Faith, and I'll do that in just a minute. But before doing so, I just wanted to comment. I had heard a talk that Armin sent me from her son when he was 11 years old, speaking on the issue of equality. And then she sent me another talk when he was 16 years old, again, speaking on the issue of equality between men and women. And after looking at both of those talks, I just responded to her and said, there's nothing more that I can say. He really said it all. And if anybody gets a chance to go and look at those two talks, they're really, really, really great talks. So Armin, he's not here today, but I want him to get this message back from me. So anyway, let me share my screen with you guys, because some people are auditory learners, some are visual learners. So I decided I'm going to put a presentation up with some talking points, and then I'm going to put myself on the screen with it so that everybody can have the benefit. The Baha'i Faith is an independent world religion who's got basically a following of about 6 million people worldwide in more than 200 different countries and territories. Baha'is represent some 2,100 different racial, ethnic, and tribal groups, people from all walks of life, all social and economic backgrounds. And perhaps it's considered one of the most diverse assemblages of people on the face of the planet. And what is it that unites all of these people? And it is basically a belief in these three onenesses. In the Baha'i teachings, Baha'u'llah talked a great deal. Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith, talked about the oneness of God, that we may know God by many different names, whether it's Allah, whether it's Deus, Jehovah, or Vishnu. But there's one creative source in the universe, one God. And so one God, many names is one of the central teachings of the Baha'i Faith. A second one is the oneness of religion. Baha'is believe that if there is only one God, God is the author or the source of all the great religions that have come upon humanity. And so Baha'is believe that in a concept called progressive revelation, that all of the great religions are like a chapter in the one religion of God. So Baha'is believe in Hinduism, in Buddhism, in Judaism, in Christianity, in Islam, and many indigenous people have had their own religious traditions. Many African cultures have had their own spiritual guidance. Baha'u'llah talked about all of the peoples of the world have been beneficiaries of the guidance of God throughout history. And so one religion, many chapters. And then the third central teaching of the Baha'i Faith is the concept of the oneness of humanity, that there are many different cultures, many people, many ethnicities, but we are in fact one human family, and that realization is critical to solving many of the world's problems that exist today. And so Baha'is believe that Baha'u'llah, who lived in Persia, what is ancient Persia, what is now Iran, Baha'u'llah lived between 1817 and 1892. And Baha'is believe that he is the most recent in the great divine educators or manifestations or prophets of God, and that his mission was to help educate humanity and help it achieve its next level of maturity as a social organism. Now, there's a lot more to the Baha'i Faith than that, but that's a brief introduction just to get us started. And let me now get to the topic at hand. So my theme is bringing spirituality and feminine leadership qualities into the workplace. And I'm going to introduce the subject a little bit so that we have a framework for discussion. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is this concept of spirituality that I talk about, and what are the feminine leadership qualities that we're talking about. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about my personal story and my journey and how I got to work with the subject that I work with today. And then I'm going to share some examples of the types of things that we do in organizational development work that address this topic. And throughout the talk, I'll be exploring different Baha'i principles, one of them being the equality of women and men, and then other issues that are important from a Baha'i perspective. And really at the end, what I'd like to do is engage all of you as much as possible with any comments or questions that you might have on any of the subject matter that we talk about throughout the presentation. And I promise to do this in no more than 25 to 30 minutes so that we can have a lot of time for discussion. Fair enough? Okay, hope so. So how do I define spirituality? There's many people who are spiritual but not religious. I think you guys would agree with that. And there's also many people who call themselves religious but are not at all spiritual and wind up doing a whole bunch of stuff that don't unite people, don't make the world a better place, and just cause a whole bunch of chaos. So when I look at the concept of spirituality, it involves a recognition or feeling or sense or belief that there's something greater than myself, something more to being human than the sensory experience that we go through, and that there's a greater whole to which we are part of. And that greater whole, whether you look at it as nature, whether you look at it as your connection to other human beings, whatever it is, that is either cosmic or divine in nature. So the concept of spirituality, in my mind, is not connected to being religious. It's connected to being connected to other people, connected to the universe, connected to nature. So when you translate the concept of spirituality to the workplace, it's important to kind of understand how you have to work with this concept in the workplace. There was an empirical study that was published in the Sloan Management Review, MIT's publication. And it was basically the results from interviews done with senior executives, from questionnaires sent to HR executives and managers. And it talked about spirituality, and participants in that study, they differentiated strongly, very much like I just did, about religiosity and spirituality. They said that religion was not something that was appropriate to really talk about in the work world because it just creates a lot of polemic, a lot of problems, a lot of division within people. But they did see spirituality as something that was highly appropriate as a subject of discussion. And some of them had some fears, maybe reservations, maybe were even shy about doing it based on the fear of, offending somebody, but they still felt that talking about spiritual subjects was essential to be able to do within the work environment. And so in that study, they defined spirituality as a basic feeling of being connected with one's complete self, being connected with others and the entire universe. And in a single word, if it best described the meaning of spirituality and the vital role that it plays in people's lives, that word would have been interconnectedness. So in that study, those associated with organizations they perceived as more spiritual also saw their organizations as more profitable. They reported that they were able to bring more of their complete selves to work. They could deploy more of their full creativity, emotions, and intelligence. And in short, organizations viewed as more spiritual get more from their participants and vice versa. So that was a very important point from this study. And to sum everything up, the study showed that people were hungry for ways in which they could practice spirituality in the workplace without offending their coworkers or causing acrimony. They believed also that unless organizations learn how to harness the whole person and the immense spiritual energy that is at the core of everyone, they will not be able to produce world-class products or services. So this was a study that was done 24 years ago at MIT. And much more recent studies reaffirm that this is even more true today than it was 24 years ago. So these are some important reasons why bringing spirituality into the workplace is so important. Now, let me change gears a little bit and talk about how I define feminine leadership qualities and why it's important to work this issue as well. This is a quote from Abdu'l-Baha, who was the son of the founder of the Baha'i Faith, Baha'u'llah. And Abdu'l-Baha expounded on many of his father's teachings. And one of the things he said was, the world in the past has been ruled by force, and man has dominated over woman by reason of his more forceful and aggressive qualities, both of body and mind. But the balance is already shifting. Force is losing its weight, and mental alertness, intuition, and the spiritual qualities of love and service in which woman is strong are gaining ascendancy. Hence, the new age will be an age less masculine and more permeated with the feminine ideals, or to speak more exactly, will be an age in which the masculine and feminine elements of civilization will be more evenly balanced. Now, this is a very important statement, and there's also an analogy in the Baha'i writings that says that humanity is like a bird, and it has two wings. One is man and one is woman. And until both wings are equally strong and developed and allowed opportunities to grow and develop and exercise their influence, the bird of humanity will not be able to fly to its highest heights. And so when we think about feminine leadership qualities, you can even ask for artificial intelligence to tell you what are these feminine leadership qualities. And ChatGPT confirmed for me that these are 7 feminine leadership qualities: empathy, collaboration, communication, flexibility, creativity, compassion, and mentorship. Let's look at each one of them individually. Empathy, being able to understand and relate to the feelings of others. Collaboration, working with others to achieve a common goal. Communication, being able to effectively communicate with colleagues and clients. Flexibility, being able to adapt to changing circumstances. Creativity, thinking outside the box to come up with innovative solutions. Compassion, being able to show understanding and kindness to others. And then mentorship, which really has everything to do with nurturing and encouraging and developing the potential of others. So if you look at these qualities that are considered primarily feminine, we should ask ourselves, why are we not developing these qualities in men as well as women? And why is it that only now the world is starting to value some of these feminine leadership qualities? I just recently got back from a conference that I attended in Portugal from an institution called EBBF, which stands for Ethical Business Building the Future. It was a conference that focused on concepts of sustainability, and it basically dealt with a lot of topics about how to bring feminine leadership qualities into the workplace, servant-oriented leadership, how to harness the power of corporations to do good, and a whole host of different topics. And the people who participated in this conference were practitioners like myself who are trying to bring spirituality into the workplace, trying to make the world increase the dialogue and the perspective that we have when dealing with many of these issues. But one of the presenters at this conference was a lady named Dr. Roya Akavan. Forgive me for 1 minute. She's a professor and researcher at St. Cloud State University in Minnesota. And she brought in a lot of data that were data about advances in leadership research. And some of that data I'm going to share with you right now directly from her work. But she shared some data that talked about modern characterizations of effective leadership have become more consonant with the female gender role. And it talked about, the research also talked about leadership behaviors are in very short supply in today's corporations. And these leadership behaviors, primarily associated with women, will be critical to meet expected challenges companies will face over the coming years. This is from a McKinsey and Company study in 2008. And the gist of the research basically came out saying that studies on effective leadership showed a clear trajectory away from traditionally male traits toward traditionally female characteristics, and emphasized leadership behaviors that women tended to engage in more frequently than men. So her research and much of the research out there today is validating the need for striking a new balance in the world, in corporations and businesses, because a recognition is being had that the world, the male-dominated world that we live in, is out of balance, and we need to strike a new balance. So that was all contextualizing for the work that I actually do as an organizational development consultant today. But I wanted to talk a little bit about my personal journey, because I believe everybody is on a journey. And I believe that the journey that we are all on is about finding meaning and purpose and connection with others, and ultimately about how to use that discovery process and the talents that we find and uncover to be useful and contribute to the journey of others, to contribute to the society in which we live. So as I tell you a little bit about my journey, you'll find out how I got to do the work that I actually do. And so you're looking at a picture of my mother and father up at the top. And then in the middle row, you're seeing my dark chocolate sister, Mary, my two white chocolate sisters, Christina and Carolyn. And then you're seeing the milk chocolate siblings, Tracy, Rhea, Gregory, and myself. My parents both had a previous marriage before they met each other. And so by the time they met each other, they had 3 kids already between them. And then together they had 4 more kids, of which I'm the youngest. But I show you this picture because the essence of my story is that I was raised by 5 older sisters and a mother who had a tremendous nurturing impact on me and helped me as a man become very comfortable with the feminine side that I possess. Because the reality is that men and women both possess a masculine and a feminine side. Men have a feminine side and women have a masculine side. And part of our challenge in life is to be able to manifest the fullness of our being and learn from one another. And so in my upbringing, based on the way I was brought up, it was all of the feminine qualities were normal for me and for me to be able to manifest. But this is where things got a little tricky, because when I went to college, I studied mechanical engineering. I was a person who had multiple interests, but eventually I had to pick a direction. And so I chose engineering. And all the way through my engineering studies, I always questioned, was this what I was going to do for the rest of my life or not? But I kept knocking on the doors and I kept going through them, and finally got to the end of my engineering studies. And I started working as a process engineer and eventually a business area manager. I became a production manager and a supply chain manager, and eventually became a plant manager. But throughout all of this journey and all of these different roles, I felt completely like a fish out of water. I felt uncomfortable in the environments that I was in, and I wasn't exactly sure why I was so uncomfortable. And then finally at age 36, I had an epiphany that maybe producing a product was not what I was here to do. 1 year prior to becoming a plant manager, I was working for Procter & Gamble, and I was producing 12 million cases of toilet paper for the West Coast of the United States. And I'm sure that toilet paper, it was the best quality toilet paper, is White Cloud and Charmin, and I'm sure it made people's bottoms a little better. But that was not my idea of how I wanted to make the world a better place. And all of a sudden, you know, I had been telling myself that if I just climb the corporate ladder high enough, eventually I'll become comfortable. But all the time I was there, I felt uncomfortable. And so it was a very scary moment for me, because I had invested a lot in my education, my career. I had 2 small children at the time. I was getting paid a lot of money, but I was not feeling happy or fulfilled, and not feeling that that was the way I wanted to contribute to making the world a better place. So I had to really start regrouping and doing some soul searching. And by that time, I had become very aware that all of the corporate environments I'd been a part of, seemed to be lacking balance, seemed to be lacking that balance between the masculine and the feminine. And I identified that I was in an environment that many times also just paid lip service to diversity. I'd grown up in a very diverse family in different parts of the world. And so the concepts of diversity were very much embedded in me. The masculine and the feminine were embedded in me. I had already decided, and I also loved to work with virtues and values. And in the corporate environments that I was in, I saw a lot of lip service paid to virtues and values. but not a whole lot of practice in relation to virtues and values. So I had decided that producing a product maybe was not for me. And all of a sudden I got this insight that maybe my product was people, producing or helping to produce better people. And so then and there is the beginning of a concept that I work with today, but I was searching for what was called my ikigai. Ikigai is a Japanese word that means to live, or iki means to live and gai is reason. And so the concept of ikigai is your motive force for living, your purpose for living, being connected to what gives you a sense of purpose, and then acting on that purpose every day. So the concept of ikigai is really the intersection of four things: what you really do well, what you are really passionate about, what the world needs or organizations around you need, and how to make a living or get paid for doing that. And so in my journey, when I came to that epiphany, I started to search for my ikigai, and I had to take stock of what I was really good at. And in all my experiences leading and working with people, I realized that I did love working with people, and perhaps I enjoyed more developing people than working with technology. I was passionate about values. I was passionate about diversity. I was passionate about the equality of women and men. And I saw that the world really needed those qualities within the work environment, because the feelings of not being nurtured that I felt in the corporate world, I'm sure other people felt them as well. So today I work with this concept of ikigai, which is really connecting individual purpose to organizational purpose and helping people find their direction in that regard. So working with values, virtues, and principles is something that we bring into the corporate world because universal values can be found in all cultures. It's the basis for healthy interactions, all of the interactions that people have. Typically, when something goes wrong, it's because of the lack of application of a particular virtue or value. And so it's critical for healthy interactions. Working on virtues and principles and values is also critical in terms of building resiliency and coping skills, because there's a tremendous amount of emotional intelligence that you can work on when you work on values and principles. And then also working on principles is critical in any organization, any business, any aspect of our life, because finding practical solutions many times is dependent on elevating things to a level of principle, and then you can find the solution to any complex problem. So one other way that we bring spirituality into the workplace is educating about the multidimensional nature of human beings. And here it's important to talk about what psychology affirms is that human beings have essentially three distinct dimensions. We have a physical dimension, a psychic or emotional and psychological dimension, and we have a spiritual dimension. And in each of these dimensions, we have specific needs that must be met for us to remain in balance, for us to remain whole. And on a physical level, it's very clear to see that if you don't have air, if you don't drink water, if you don't get rest, if you're not able to exercise, if you're not able to go to the bathroom, if you're not meeting these basic human needs, you can actually become sick and even die. But when we think about the psychic or the psychological and emotional dimension, we often don't think about the needs we have in that dimension: the need to love, the need to self-actualize, the need to have our self-esteem preserved. There are a whole bunch of emotional and psychological needs that need to be satisfied for people to remain healthy in a work environment. For example, if managers are not aware of people's basic psychological and emotional needs, then typically they create a tremendous amount of unmotivation for people within those environments. So helping people become aware of the needs in the various dimensions. And then in the spiritual dimension, this is where spirituality and religiosity are not synonymous. You know, everybody has a spiritual dimension, whether you believe in God or not. Your spiritual dimension is where you hold your values. It's where you practice your virtues. It's where you have your appreciation for art and beauty. And some people have a need to be able to connect to a higher source. Some people have the need to connect to nature, but it's in the spiritual dimension that people basically work those issues. And so helping people understand the multidimensional nature of human beings is one of the critical ways that we work spirituality in the workplace as well. Another aspect of working spirituality is service-oriented leadership. And this is a leadership that really embodies many feminine qualities, because servant-oriented leadership is not about a personal quest for power, prestige, or material rewards. It's a leadership that's oriented based on service and service to the common good. It's focused on recognizing the nobility of every human being and helping to create environments that foster people being able to give their very best selves. Servant leadership works to build the foundation based on shared goals. And the focus is sharing information, building common vision, self-management, high levels of interdependence, learning from mistakes, encouraging the creative input from every team member, and more than anything, questioning a lot of the mental models that sometimes hold us back in organizations. So finally, one of the other ways that we work on spirituality in the workplace is working the concept of systemic thinking and learning organizations, because when I think about spirituality, it's really about interconnectedness, understanding that you're connected to a larger system or a larger whole. And so understanding organizations as a system with many subsystems, just like the human body, we have many subsystems working within the human body for the overall health of the entire body. And so as you work in organizations, helping people think more systemically, then you are able to create greater synergy, greater effectiveness within those organizations. So a lot of times we work with a tool called a learning cycle, which helps people analyze their experience, conceptualize or reflect upon that experience, trying to figure out what we can learn from our experience, then conceptualize, figuring out how we can improve based on our reflection. And once you figure out how you can improve based on your reflection, then you can generate a new experience that is better than that previous one. And that generates a continuous improvement loop. Another way that we work on spirituality in the workplace is teaching people consultation skills. And here, Baha'u'llah in his writings said that the maturity of the gift of understanding is made manifest through consultation, and that people should use consultation to solve all sorts of problems. So we teach people the effective skills of consultation. And then finally, we also focus a great deal on helping people understand how to value and appreciate diversity. The majority of people in the world today are still at a stage of tolerating diversity. And most people have gotten to that stage of tolerating diversity. Some people have gone beyond that and really have learned to respect diversity. But the real opportunities for any person who wants to grow is learning how to appreciate and grow from diversity. And that's the challenge and opportunity for many businesses and organizations, because diversity has been shown to be a tremendous tool for growth and progress if people learn how to appreciate it. So before opening up for questions and dialogue, I wanted to just share a couple of quotes with you guys. from a few books that I've read over the last 5 or so years that have been very impactful for me. One of them was called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And in that book, one of the things that he says is that many people go through life in an almost permanent state of dissatisfaction, sort of never knowing, but they're sort of in a almost permanent state of dissatisfaction. And I really believe that this has a lot to do with not being aware of your multidimensional nature and the importance of seeking balance between the 3 dimensions that comprise the human being. And so in that book, he says, life will give you whatever experience is the most helpful for the evolution of your consciousness. And then he also says, be true to life by being true to your inner purpose. As you become present and thereby total in what you do, your actions become charged with spiritual power. Be true to life by being true to your inner purpose. As you become present and thereby total in what you do, your actions become charged with spiritual power. And I share this with you because of the journey that I've taken to become whole with my purpose and to find my purpose in spite of those challenges up to age 36. And I share this for all young people listening, because many times we don't find our ikigai right away. It may take us a few years to find your ikigai. But once you find it and you become true to your life's purpose, then you will be able to exercise a much greater amount of power and influence. And then a final quote from a guy named Michael Singer, who wrote a number of books, but one of them is The Untethered Soul at Work. In his book, he talks about the incredible process that we go through in this life and how life is comprised of a series of moments, and that every moment provides us an opportunity to be of service to that moment. For example, we are here together, all of us, for a brief moment that is this talk and the interaction that we're going to have. And there's a chance that we may not see each other for the rest of time, but this is a moment that we are sharing, and the degree to which we can all be present in this moment is the degree to which we can be of service to this moment and maybe bring something that elevates the moment for somebody else. So he says in his book that everything that happens at work is a chance to offer our whole selves, our love, our passion, our creativity in service to the miraculous moment that unfolds before us. So we can really practice spirituality in every moment of our lives by being present and by trying to be of service to that moment. And this connects to a wonderful teaching within the Baha'i Faith that says that whatever work we do, whatever work we engage in, if it is performed in the spirit of service to others, it is the same as worshiping God. So if we have that mental consciousness of trying to be of service, trying to elevate other people, it is the same as worshiping God. And so these are essentially the comments that I wanted to preface our conversation with. I appreciate everybody's patience in listening to me, and I hope we've given each of you a little food for thought to generate a further dialogue.
Thank you so much. This was really great, really interesting topic. If anyone has any questions, we have time for Q&A now, so you can put it in the chat. The first question is, how does the woke trend in corporate leadership, for example, ESG or DEI, agree or disagree with your Baha'i perspective on ideal corporate leadership?
I'm not sure I'm going to be able to speak 100% to the woke movement, but the reality is that the empirical research out in corporations is showing that these feminine leadership qualities are critical within organizations. And so there are many organizations who are sort of on the forefront of leadership practices, and there are many that are sort of on the tail end of leadership practices and have not gotten there yet. So what I find is that we work with a small universe of companies that are much more progressive and much more focused on trying to create a sustainable environment for their employees. And then there are a number of organizations who basically are still giving lip service to that concept. The woke movement sometimes is a movement that people know how to use the jargon words of sustainability, of diversity, of inclusion. You can use the key buzzwords, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're committed to those principles or those values. So what we try to do is, there are certain companies that we can work our entire agenda with. There are other companies that we find they're very much taking baby steps because they're basically still using the jargon words, but they're not yet fully committed to implementing some of the changes that need to be made. Not sure I answered exactly what you needed, but let's go to the next one and we'll see what else we can do.
While we're waiting for more questions, I guess one question I had is, some people think that to say there are certain qualities that are feminine is kind of against the equality of men and women. What do you think about that? Or do you think that there are differences in the qualities men and women bring?
Well, that's a great question. And I tried to address it in some of my comments up to now, but I'll restate it because my understanding of what happens to us from a Baha'i perspective when we leave this plane of existence is that we die to our physical body and our soul continues in a spiritual dimension. And that soul has no sex. And so the sex that we are born into in this physical reality that we live in is masculine or feminine. But within the masculine and the feminine, it's kind of the yin and yang. There is the masculine in the feminine and the feminine in the masculine. So as a soul, we have the ability to manifest both the masculine and the feminine. A man has a feminine side, just like a woman has a masculine side. But many times in society, we're conditioned to believe that only certain things are masculine and only certain things are feminine. And we give value more to the masculine than we give to the feminine. And so one of the challenges that we have as a society is understanding how to value the feminine qualities that women seem to manifest more based on the gender role that they're born into. But men also have the ability to manifest all of those 7 qualities that I listed. Men have the ability to manifest those qualities as well. And it would be wonderful if men felt comfortable manifesting those feminine qualities. And the work environment and the research shows that successful management in today's world requires that men have more of their feminine side developed, more of their feminine qualities developed. And so we also need to take stock and understand that many times women who have been in the corporate world, the only way they were able to succeed in the corporate world is if they adopted aggressive masculine qualities to be able to survive in a cutthroat type environment. And so many times women, to advance in the corporate ladder, they had to deny what comes most naturally to them, whether empathy, compassion, nurturing qualities. They had to deny all those things to be able to succeed. And so the balance that the world is needing today is for more men to develop more of their feminine qualities and more women to be able to be comfortable showing their feminine qualities and bringing their true selves to work and to organizations. So I hope I've answered that question, because it's not about just men have masculine or feminine, or just women have certain qualities. We both have the ability to manifest both qualities, both the masculine and the feminine, but we need to make it okay for men to manifest feminine qualities, traditionally feminine qualities, and we need to make it okay for women and value the feminine qualities that women manifest.
That makes sense. Thank you. So speaking of, you were speaking of jargon or lip service, how do we as Baha'is fight against the challenges in our culture about these things? In other words, how do we respond when we're faced with the numerous individuals who are religious but not spiritual, which might give people the impression that Baha'is are also just about lip service?
Can you rephrase the question? I want to make sure I understand it before I answer.
So I guess the question is about, a lot of people think being religious means you're just paying lip service, or just saying a lot of jargon. So as Baha'is, how do we show that we're not just doing that when we say we're...
Okay, that's a great question, honestly, because, I think let deeds, not words, be your adorning. That's a reference from a quote in the Bahá'í Faith, that our actions really need to speak much louder than our words. We have to walk the walk and talk the talk. People are looking for example. People are looking for true leadership. People are looking for values. And so we have to champion the values that we believe in, whether it's justice, whether it's equality, whether it's the equality of women and men. If you hear a sexist joke or a racist joke, you need to be able to stand up and say, hey, that offends me. I don't like hearing stuff like that. You don't have to necessarily give the person a sermon about what they should do or what they shouldn't do, but you need to take a stand and stand up and be counted for what you believe in. And so I think the challenge for all of us today is sometimes, we've heard racist jokes or we've heard sexist comments and we haven't known what to do. And everybody walks away from those interactions feeling uncomfortable. But the minimum that we should do is take a stand and say, hey, I don't like hearing stuff like that. I don't subscribe to that ideology. And then in our own lives, we should always be striving to grow, striving to learn from people who have a different view of reality than we do. Men should always be striving to learn as much as they can from women about what they can do to support women. So I think this is how we walk the walk and talk the talk.
Abdu'l-Baha said that women have more intuition than men. How are men to improve their intuition?
Boy, I wish every man had the benefit of having 5 older sisters and a mother, because it took me till I was in my mid-30s to realize that I was a very intuitive man. I didn't realize what power I had, but being raised by women and being nurtured by women, men become more comfortable with their intuitive powers. And so a lot of times the way we raise boys is, no, you can't cry, and boys don't do this, and boys don't do that, and boys can't feel this, boys can't feel that. And so working on the equality of women and men is not only a liberation for women, it's a liberation for men, because many times men are not being able to be their true selves, their whole selves, be all that they can be. And so I can tell you that being raised by so many women has facilitated every interaction that I have as a man with the women in my life, whether it's my wife, whether it's my daughters, whether it's my sisters, whether it's my female colleagues. And so, you know, exposure to more women in your life, asking more women questions, exploring the topic for yourself about how to become more connected with my own intuition. You can find all these research materials on the web, and definitely any one of us men can grow in that direction if we want to.
I guess another question I have is, like, for people who are maybe not leaders in their workplaces, but they want, you know, they're men and they want to start incorporating some changes, incorporating feminine qualities. What are some practical steps they can take?
I think a really practical step is pay close attention to the women in your environment and to how they are listened to or not. Because so many times women will be in an environment and they'll say something, and then the idea gets completely brushed over, and then a man will say the exact same thing, and then the idea gets adopted. And so look around always as a man to the women in your environment and ask them what they go through, what they experience, what they see, because men and women have a different view of the world. It's almost like we're two different cultures. We experience different realities. And anthropology has taught us that people define what is real based on what they experience. Now, women experience the world in a different way than men experience the world. Black people experience life in America in a different way than white people experience life in America. And so if you are not open to wanting to learn from somebody else's reality, you will continue to insist on your view of reality, that everything is the way you see it or the way you experience it. And so men can always learn from women in their environment around them, to be able to become more sensitized about what are things that are missing there, what are things that they can be supportive of in that environment, what things do they themselves feel is missing that up to now they haven't had the courage to speak out about because they've been maybe afraid that, well, nobody else talks about this, so maybe other people don't see the need for this. But men have to trust themselves more, especially men who want to make a change. They have to trust that if something is missing for them, chances are it's missing for other men too, you know, that if there's anybody who has any question about their own journey and how to find their way, you can ask any question. There's no dumb question. If you have any questions about the Baha'i Faith, there's no dumb question about that either. Whatever you guys want to talk about.
Okay, another question in the meantime. How can my husband promote the equality of men and women, and my son, my father, my uncle, my male cousins?
Okay, this is a great question because every man has the opportunity to promote the equality of women and men, especially in his own household, by trying to role model equality within the household, helping out with chores, helping out with kid duties, helping out, you know, many times men need to be able to be in a nurturing role. They get so much out of that from their kids and the relationship and the closeness they establish with their kids as women do. And so a lot of men can champion the equality by being able to create more space for their spouses to take care of themselves, because many times mothers are working outside the home, taking care of kids, taking care of the home, cooking, doing all sorts of things. It's a very unequal division of labor in most societies. Women are doing way more things than men are doing. And a lot of times men identify primarily with the breadwinner role, but the reality of life for many couples today is that many times women are earning more money than men. Sometimes women are the ones who are outside the home and The man is needing to take care of children in the home. So in each couple, people have to be able to do a little bit of everything. You know, men can learn to take care of a home. Men can learn how to cook. Men can learn how to clean, how to sew. And the more we teach our sons how to do these things as a natural progression, as a natural part of life, the less uncommon it will be in the world. And that's really the type of balance that the world needs today.
Thank you. Slight variation of the question from before, but how can one promote equality in the workplace?
Promoting equality in the workplace is recognizing the contributions of the women around you, striving to promote equity and equality, recognizing that you don't have a monopoly on the truth, that you may look at something a certain way. Women may bring a different perspective to the table, and that perspective is as valid as your own. Promoting equality really is about valuing the diversity of the women around you, in your workplace, in your family, valuing your spouse, valuing your mother, valuing your sisters, valuing your daughters, creating space for them to be heard and for them to understand that they have a voice. It's very critical for me as a father to make sure my daughters clearly understand that they have something to say, something to contribute, and that the world needs to hear them. The world needs to have space for them, and for them to have the confidence going into the world, even though it is male dominated, them to have the confidence and them to have the space to know that their contribution is needed, because the world is currently out of balance. And the only way it's going to come into balance, as Abdu'l-Baha says, is as the world is more permeated with the feminine ideals, the world will become increasingly more balanced. And that's what the world currently needs.
What might you suggest to those who are deeply afraid of their feminine qualities?
I don't think we have to be afraid of our feminine side. You know, the feminine side is about empathy. It's about love. It's about compassion. It's about service. It's about, and all of these qualities need to be in men just as they need to be in women. And so there's nothing wrong with our feminine side. It's what the world needs to strive for in balance, strive for balance. I saw something about, I don't know if it was related to this comment, something that just came up on the chat. But I think we live in a society that is somewhat homophobic. And so, you know, we need to work on men becoming more confident and comfortable with their feminine side. And we also need to raise boys to be more empathic and in touch with their intuition, so that society as a whole starts to migrate in a new direction. And boys don't have to be worried about being sensitive. They can understand that being sensitive is not a weakness. You know, it took me until I was about 36 years old to realize that the heightened level of sensitivity that I had to a lot of issues was my intuition. And it took me forever to become comfortable understanding that about myself. But my son and my daughters are part of a new generation, and they will be a lot more comfortable with their intuition than I was at my age. And I think it's a generational process that we all need to contribute to. But, you know, just thinking back to a talk that Bayan gave when he was 11 years old, and when he gave another talk on the equality of women and men when he was 16 years old. I could tell that he's also a young man who had a very strong feminine influence in his life. And so he's probably a lot more in touch with his feminine qualities than most men are. But we as men have the ability to manifest the feminine and the masculine, just as women have the ability to manifest the feminine and the masculine.
Thank you. So this person's asking, like, what about some concrete examples? So I guess you're saying just exposure and contact with women, anything else?
Yeah, I think the key point I'm trying to stress is we have to go away from this discussion understanding that every human soul, at least from a Baha'i understanding, we were created in the image and likeness of God. And so we have the capacity to manifest all the attributes of God. And the attributes of God are both masculine and feminine. So we have to go away from this conversation understanding that to be a whole and complete being, we have to become comfortable with both sides of our duality. So it's not just, it's not just men doing one thing or women doing one thing. It's we all have to be able to be whole.
Thank you. The next question, congrats for going into the lion's den and doing this important work. Many women just think it's hopeless and prefer to create their own workplaces. What accommodations do you ask companies to make to attract women, for example, related to equal pay, safety in the workplace, pregnancy, child rearing, career development, balanced with family responsibility?
Wow, that is a great question, and it's a tough question. I think I'm gonna try to answer it the best I can, and that is to say that there are many HR managers that I deal with who are women. And what I specifically strive to do with them is try to empower them to really be who they are and be confident in what they feel and what they perceive and what they believe. Because, and I talk about the imbalance of the world, I talk about these principles of equality, and I really, with all the women that I work with as HR managers, I try to empower them to be confident being who they are, because in being who they are, they will naturally start to bring into their environments the qualities that are missing. Now, I have 3 business partners who are women. So one of the things that I experienced in terms of the discrimination that women face in the work world is a company wanted to contract our services, but they were used to paying me a rate that was higher than they were used to paying my 3 business partners. And my 3 business partners, before they became my business partners, they had done work with this particular employer on their own. And this employer had paid me a certain rate, and they were used to paying the 3 of them a different rate. And now these 3 women were working within my business. We incorporated together. And so now we were doing the work together. And when we went to charge for the work, they said, no, we're used to paying you this much, but we're not used to paying them this much. And so I said, well, we did the work together, and the product that we developed is as much theirs as it is mine, and this is what the work is worth, and this is what we're charging. And so I saw firsthand how women can get discriminated in the workforce. And I was 100% prepared at that point in time to lose that business, because it was a sizable amount of business. And we were very much prepared to let that go by the wayside if necessary, but we were not going to change the pay scale that they get paid less for the same work that they did as me. So the reality is that I can see how many women can get discouraged because there is a long way to go. There is a long way to go. But there are other men, there are other women, there's an army of people, there's young people, there's old people, there's all sorts of people who are little by little working on this issue. And it's an issue that is ripe for this day and age. There is no going back, you know. Abdu'l-Baha says that this time will be characterized by a greater balance of the feminine and the masculine. And this is the direction that we need to work on. And it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to take some generations, but I know for sure my kids are going to see their dad committed to this issue for the long haul. And my sisters will always see their brothers committed to this issue. So we got a long way to go, but we can't give up.
Thank you. I guess there's a question asking about the transgender movement, and do you think that's, you know, a misunderstanding of feminine and masculine qualities? If you feel comfortable commenting on that.
I think there's so much negative stuff that gets brought up about the transgender movement, and I feel so deeply for people who have to deal with the discrimination, whatever kind of discrimination they are dealing with. The reality that I don't wind up dealing a whole lot with specific questions about the transgender movement and the work that I do. But I know for a fact that we have to be focused on eliminating every form of prejudice that exists and creating space for people to be authentically human. And to be authentically human means that regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, or even somewhere in between, we are able to manifest all of the spiritual qualities that God put in us. And those are the qualities that we need to be able to value and champion in every single person on this earth, regardless of their sexual identity, regardless of their gender, regardless of any of those differences that are minor in the sight of God. Because God created all of us. And so we are all worthy of respect and dignity.
Thank you. It looks like that's all the questions we have. So thank you so much, Mr. Howard, for this talk and answering all of our questions. It was really a treat.
Thank you, Paimane. I hope that everybody got something out of my journey.
Definitely. So our speaker next week will be Dr. Jenna Khoradad, and her topic is The Dawn of the Global Age, the Declaration of the Bab. So if you're not on our mailing list or subscribe to our YouTube channel, I've put the links to those in the chat, and these talks are every Saturday at noon Eastern time. Thank you, everyone. See you next week. Bye.